This is not a video that I planned on making or really wanted to make or ever thought that I would have to make, but I'm here making it because something happened and I feel like it's important to share with you guys because what happened to me really could happen to anyone, and I think that there's lessons to be learned out of this. So I do want to share with you guys because I do think it's, you know, it's something useful to keep in mind and always be well aware of. So there was a little disaster, you could say, in my reptile room tonight. It is currently 3:59 in the morning. I was planning to be in bed by now, but something happened which kind of, you know, prevented that from happening, which is why I'm sitting here right now. Don't really know why I'm in the bathroom. I never film here. For some reason I just felt like sitting on my bathroom floor, so we're here. But yeah, let's talk about what happened. So there was a little bit of a disaster in my reptile room tonight. Now, thankfully, every single animal I have is completely fine. You know, thankful for that. Every single animal I have is fine. There was not a single like injury or anything. Like, everyone is 100% fine. So don't worry about my animals. But what happened, you know, could have been a lot worse if I wasn't there to catch it so quickly. I don't know if I want to like explain what happened and then show you guys, or if I should just go and show you. I think I'll just go and I'll explain a little bit and then show. Okay. This video is also going to introduce you guys to a new pet that I have, and this is not how I wanted the introduction to go, but this video involves my new pet who you guys have not met yet, so you're gonna meet him. So I guess I'll just, you know, get right on with it. The pet that you guys are going to meet is a Brazilian rainbow boa. I got him about a month back. He was in quarantine and just recently moved into his permanent cage in the reptile room, as he was just finished with his quarantine recently. And his cage has actually been set up in the reptile room for a few months now. You guys have actually seen it in some previous videos. He just was never in it because I did set up his cage, I think about 2 months before I got him, I believe, because I did set it up with live plants, and, you know, like, I wanted a Brazilian rainbow boa, so I was, you know, well prepared to get one. Like I said, his cage was set up 2 months before I even had him, so you guys have seen it in my reptile room before. I just didn't have a snake in it at the time. Anyways, his name is Richard. He's a baby Brazilian rainbow boa, and he's very adorable, and I love him. But that's not really the point of this video, so let's go ahead and talk about what happened. So I was in my reptile room like a little while ago doing my nightly routine in there. I was there like feeding everyone who had to be fed. I was feeding my geckos. I was like misting cages, watering plants, because I do have a lot of bioactive and live planted cages in there if you're not familiar with my reptile room. So I was watering plants, feeding, you know, all of that stuff, everything I do every night. And while I was in there, I was noticing a sort of very faint smoky smell. Now, it wasn't like overpowering or anything, it just felt very, very faint. So I decided to do some investigating, because I mean, you never want to just smell something slightly burning and leave it. So I did some investigating around my cages, and I thought that I pinpointed the one where it came from. And it seemed to be coming from my Brazilian rainbow boa cage, who is on the bottom shelf of my snake shelving unit thing, in basically the bottom left cage. If you're facing it, is on the left. And by the way, all of these shelves are heated with heat tape and they are all hooked up to a thermostat. And every single cage on that shelf, it does have airflow like between the cage and the shelf. Anytime you're using a heating device like a heat pad or heat tape, you want it to be hooked up to a thermostat, and you want to make sure that there's airflow in between the heating pad and the cage. You don't want it to be like squished, because then it can get trapped and overheat. So there was airflow with all of my cages. They were hooked up to thermostat, so just know that. It wasn't like a case where I didn't have a thermostat on it, because I did. But then I discovered something went wrong with the heat tape. So now that I've kind of explained that to you guys a little bit, let's go and take a look in my reptile room and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, here is what my reptile room looks like. There's a really loud cricket somewhere in my house, sorry. But this is what my reptile room looks like. All of the lights on the cages are currently off right now because it is nighttime. Usually I would have this light off too, but since I'm filming right now, it's on. But as you can see, there's a cage on the floor here, and that has to do with the little disaster that happened. So before we look at, you know, the disaster I've been talking about, I want to show you guys this cage quickly. Since I did have to introduce my rainbow boa in this cage, and I mean this cage was, you know, the main one affected in this issue, I want to show it to you guys. So this is my baby rainbow boa's cage. It is, you know, completely live planted. Brazilian rainbow boas come from, you know, the Amazon, where there's lots of plants, lots of cover, there's lots of leaves on the ground. And the main thing is with them is they need very high humidity. You essentially want the substrate to almost be permanently damp. There's some really good videos that I've seen about rainbow boas in the wild by Dave Kaufman. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I apologize if it's not, so I'll link that below. But this was his cage, basically. So it was set up, you know, with this. Obviously he's a baby. As an adult, they need far bigger cages than this, but he's very small right now. So thankfully, for the most part, his cage is still fine. The snake is fine. He has since been removed from this cage. I'll show you guys him in a minute, but yeah. So this cage is essentially responsible for what happened. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn the lights on this rack for a minute, because I do need the light on down there to show you what happened. So I went ahead and I turned the lights on quickly. So let's take a look at what happened. So this is what I found. So as I mentioned, I was... Oh, look, my sand boa came out. He's usually never out. Say hello to Comet. Anyways, so this is where I found the burning smell was coming from. So once I noticed that, I immediately slid this cage out. As you can see, all of these cages are just kind of slid into these shelving units. This one was in here, and I removed it to find this. So this is the heat tape that I use to heat, you know, my reptile cages. This strip goes along the entire bottom of this shelving unit, so it's heating both of those cages as well. There is a thermostat. Immediately once I found this, I went and I unplugged the heat tape. So this is the end to the heat tape right here, you know, just to show it has been unplugged. And just to show you guys, this is the thermostat that it was hooked up to, you know, just so you guys know it was hooked up to a thermostat. Every single piece of heat tape I have in this room, or heat pad or whatever, they're all hooked up to thermostats. You always need to use them. So yeah, just letting you guys know it was hooked up to a thermostat. Unfortunately, even when taking all of the proper safety precautions, this still happened. And I do have individual thermometers on every cage. So obviously right now this is only reading 72 degrees Fahrenheit, but obviously that's because this cage is on the floor with no heating device right now. And I do also have a heat gun that I use to measure things with. Essentially all happened very quickly. It wasn't like this had been burning for days and days and days and it was just like cooking this cage. That's not what happened, because, you know, I do monitor everything in here very closely. I wouldn't let something just burn and burn and burn for days. You know, I noticed something off and I immediately went to check on things. But this still happened, and thank God that I found it when I did, because you can see the shape that this heat tape is in. If I lift it up, you can see what it did to wood underneath. So it's crazy that that happened, but I'm very thankful that everything turned out all right. So you guys are probably wondering, like, how did this happen? I was wondering that as well. I mean, my very immediate response was to unplug the heat tape, get my animal out of the cage. I also do want to let you know I did check these cages as well, and thankfully those ones are unaffected. The only spot was this one right here, and the heat tape is unplugged now, so there is still animals in these cages, but the heat tape is unplugged, so there's nothing going to happen with them. They're completely fine. Just know that. I wouldn't dare plug this back in or anything. So I was a little confused as to what was happening, because it didn't make any sense for this to just randomly get that warm when I was taking all of the proper safety precautions, such as using a thermostat and making sure that there was proper airflow. It just did not make any sense. After allowing this some time to cool down, because obviously it was very hot when I first discovered it, I had to, like, even now I can still feel some warmth on it, and it's been quite a while. But this was very, very warm at first, so I did have to let it cool down for a little bit. And so I came back after letting it cool down, and I discovered the cause of what happened. So basically what happened that led to this here was, it turns out that this Exoterra here somehow developed a crack in the bottom of it. I can't really show you because it's just, it would be impossible for me to lift it up and film at the same time, so you'll just have to trust me that there is a crack in the back of the Exoterra cage on the bottom, underneath the bottom of the glass. So what happened is, when I misted this cage down, some of the water dripped down through the substrate and fell through the crack on the cage and landed on this heat mat. And because of the water that landed on it, that's what ultimately caused this. So yeah, that is what happened. So the reason I wanted to share this with you guys is mainly because, one, I think that there's, like, you know, an important message for people to learn with this. It's just so important to know when using any sort of heating device with reptiles that there is always a risk, and you always need to be very careful, and you always need to be aware. It's just so important that you know how your heating devices work. It's important that you're taking proper precautions with it by using thermostats and everything like that. And even sometimes when you do all of those precautions, accidents still happen. Like, obviously this cage here developing a crack in the bottom, like I said, I still don't know how that happened. When I set it up, there was no crack in it, and somehow a crack formed and water happened to leak through, and it got on the heat tape, which ultimately caused it to burn. So yeah, it's really important to keep in mind that, you know, anytime you're using heating devices like this, accidents can happen, and you have to be very well aware of that. So it's very important that you're always monitoring your heat devices. Always make sure that you are using thermostats. Make sure you have thermometers in there to check the temperatures. Use like heat guns, digital thermometers, anything. You know, the more ways you have to check it, the better. If you think anything weird is going on, you know, take a look. It's better to be safe than sorry. If you smell something weird, figure out where it's coming from as soon as you notice it. Don't wait for, you know, don't wait around on it. Check as soon as you notice, because, you know, being proactive and making sure you're on top of things can potentially, like, save your animal's life. As I mentioned, thankfully every single animal I have is completely fine. Richard, who is my rainbow boa, he was in the cage that was, you know, mainly affected. And since I was there, and since I noticed a weird smell and immediately checked, you know, he came out of it just fine. Because like I said, like, it wasn't like this has been going on for a week or anything. What happened was I misted the cage, the water dripped, and basically right after that is when the heat pad started heating up. And I noticed within a few minutes, because immediately I noticed the smell getting stronger, like the smell of smoke, it was getting stronger. So I decided to look around. I found out it was coming from his cage. So I immediately unplugged the heat device. I took Richard, I set him up in a new cage that doesn't have a crack in it. And he's there temporarily now until I get him a new Exoterra setup. Thankfully, I actually have a spare Exoterra on hand, so I don't have to, you know, spend a bunch of money on a new one. But yeah, I think that it's important for me to share these things with you. You know, I do have this platform here where, you know, thousands of people are watching my videos about my animals and, you know, learning things from them, getting inspiration from them or whatever. And I think that it's important for me to not just share the good things. You know, I think it's important for me to share these things as well that maybe aren't so great, because you know, you guys can learn things from these. I have this platform and I think it's just important for me to share as much as I can on it. If I was just sitting here only sharing the good things, it wouldn't be like the true reality of owning animals, because, you know, when you own animals, things happen, and I don't want to make it seem like owning pets is just glamorous 24/7, because it's not, and things can happen, and it's important to be aware of that. So yeah, I just thought that this would be a good thing to share with you guys, because I think a lot of you guys could, you know, learn something from this experience, and hopefully this will encourage you guys to, you know, just be extra cautious when using heating devices with any of your animals, because, you know, whether you're using a heat lamp or a ceramic heat emitter or heat tape or heat pad or a radiant heat panel, whatever you're using, you know, there's always a risk, and it's always important to be aware of that and be careful and proactive. So now that that is all done, I guess I will show you guys a few clips of Richard, my rainbow boa. You know, this is not how I wanted to introduce him, but things don't always go the way you want them to. So hope you guys enjoy meeting Richard. So here we have Richard. So, you know, I want to start by saying this is not your ideal Brazilian rainbow boa cage setup. Obviously, you guys saw what his cage setup was before. He had a beautiful, you know, live planted cage. But, you know, since this little accident happened, I had to move him into a temporary cage to make sure that he's nice and safe. So this is only where he's living for the next couple days until I get everything sorted out in the reptile room, till I get some new heating devices and his new cage all put together. So this is only temporary, so we'll be fine for him for the meantime, but this is, you know, not an ideal setup for them. So over here we have Richard in his little substrate here. I will take him out. As you guys can see, he is super tiny. He's just a young little guy. So yes, there is Richard. I've had him for a little over a month now, and he's doing great for me. He has eaten a few times, he's shed once with me, he's been pooping and passing urates, no problem. So he is doing really well. He's super tiny, he's just a young little guy, which is, you know, why his cage is the size that it is, because as adult Brazilian rainbow boas do best in cages that are like 4x2x2, but if I put him in a cage that big right now, it might be a little stressful on him. So he's currently, well, I mean, he's currently living in this, but usually he's living in a medium-low Exoterra for the time being. So yes, there is Richard. He's very cute.